Good, beautiful, beautiful day, you beautiful, beautiful souls. Today is Wednesday, May 3rd already, 2023. And this is Charla Anderson, host of the Charla Anderson Show, collector and connector of fascinating people. And everyone is fascinating, especially you. We're on this extraordinary win-win-women.com and .tv platform. I love these folks, and we're streaming live on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV, and soon to be on podcasts all over the world with Podetize. So, this is an overcomer series that I've begun in this last few weeks, and this is being a weekly show. Man, it comes fast. This is already number 10. Hard to believe, and I'm so thrilled and honored that you would take the time to take a listen and just be with us and learn from these silver hairs, right? This wisdom that and the people I'm bringing on that are truly overcomers. Today, I have Jill Reynolds of Braveheart Workshops, and we're going to introduce her in a moment. First, I want to tell you, we record this and then live, and then towards the end, we'll end it up and have question and answer and community. If anyone is able to hang on and stay for that, you're welcome to chat questions in the Zoom chat, and we can answer them at that time. So hang around. And of course, if you've been watching my show, you know that I always start with this little centering exercise, a little mini meditation, a little breathing exercise. It takes 22 seconds, and we're going to breathe in calm, hold 7 seconds, hold 4 seconds, and breathe out gratitude for 11 seconds. So will you join me on that? So breathing in calm and breathing out gratitude. Here we go. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Breathing in calm. Hold. Breathe out gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's just a small exercise that I guarantee you will make your life easier as we go, because we've gotten such a busy world. And let's just every so often, if we can just take a deep breath, man, it tanks. That's the breath of life in us, right? So it's calming. Today, I'm so grateful to have Jill Reynolds with me. She's got Braveheart Workshops. She's got a 37-year background in events and sharing her expertise and knowledge of hope, health, and healing. And she lives in Branson, Missouri, one of my favorite people. She's going to talk about overcoming what I call, she was living a life near death, I believe. Is that right, Jill? So I want to bring you on. You introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and, where you've been and where you're headed.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the show and being a part of it. I am living now in Branson, Missouri, and I started Braveheart Workshops as a result of being recovered from eating disorders. And when I was in treatment in 2012 for my eating disorder, there was a world-renowned drama therapist who did drama therapy with us. And she was amazing and offered so much hope, health, and healing. And so in 2012, I was in a major car accident at O'Hare Airport, where I was leaning inside of my vehicle in a car driving 30 miles an hour, smashed into my open car door, throwing my body to the left as I was bent over. And I was standing outside and I was bending inside. So I had to have 2 new knees, a new hip, and it left me permanently disabled. And so the trauma put me into treatment 5 different times for PTSD and eating disorders. And then I had to quit my job, Charla. I was a director of sales at hotel properties in Chicago and a general manager. I'd worked at hotels and had my certification in meeting and event planning. So I reached out to Laura and just said, hey, listen, since I'm unable to work anymore, would you be willing to do some intensive retreats? And at that time, it was just for women, to help women overcome trauma in their life. And so she said, yes. So thus began Braveheart workshops. I never had ever thought I would do something like that. And it was amazing. We did 7 events in 2017 through 2019. And the last 2, we actually then started to invite men to attend. And it was really good. My last event I did in Nashville, Tennessee, we actually had a girl who saw about the event who lived in China. She flew 2 days just to come to the event. And we actually had 4 professional therapists register to do their work with her. So they were amazing. And then she ended up getting pregnant and getting hired at a college in Boston to teach graduate students how to become drama therapists. So at that point, I felt like God was telling me to rebrand my business and plan my own events and then plan events for other people. And so within a few months, my calendar was booked for the entire year. And then COVID hit and all the events canceled except one, which is where I connected with Charla. And we went to an amazing horse ranch in Montana, Cottonwood Resort, and he did leadership skills with horses. And so all the other events except that one canceled. And then Charla and I had the ability to actually meet in person.
That was such a beautiful event, and we had an amazing time. And it was interesting to me because you think going to a horse ranch, you're going to be, riding horses. We literally walked. We never got on the horses as far as the week went, and to learn how to heal from the horse movements and stuff. Very exciting thing.
Yeah. And then we got to do, before the event, we were sent an assignment with habit finders to find out what our habits were in life and how to overcome the habits that were out of balance. And so speaking of overcoming, so it was amazing. And it was really cool for me at that event because during the event, like within 2 days of it starting, I got a phone call from my stepmom saying my beloved father had collapsed and been taken by ambulance to the hospital. And so while I was there, the participants all said, "Oh, Jill, go home, go home." And I said, "No, I'm feeling like I'm supposed to stay." And what was really cool, while you were in the arena with the other attendees and I was talking and getting this call, I walked through the stable and King was one of the horses there. And he was,
I love those.
And King was more of not of an affectionate one. He was a leader. And I went past his stable and started to cry. And he leaned into me with his little, like this, like to comfort me. And I'd cry and then he'd back away. And then he'd come in. And it was really cool to kind of see, as we're speaking about overcoming, how you lean in and sometimes you need to back away. You lean in and you pull back. And that's what King taught me. So I was able to begin my grief process there and then when the event ended, fly back to Chicago to find out my sister had died of her pancreatic cancer on September 28th in Colorado. And my father died on September 30th in Chicago. So it was a whirlwind for me of really overcoming a lot of pain of, and endings from my childhood. So I'll start with that. And, the Holy Spirit just directs me. I never even thought I'd even start with that. But that really is how we met and how I've gone on a journey. And then through that, God directed me to start doing a podcast show called The Connection Show, inspiring hope, health, and healing. And I too will be beginning my own win-win show probably in the next 30 days called Resilient Brave Hearts, Inspiring Hope, Health, and Healing. And
I
so
hadn't heard the title. I love that.
Well, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And you know what, Charla, on this journey of my life, which we'll go into a bit here, and all the trauma I've gone through, I had one professional therapist years ago who said to me, "Jill, you are the most resilient person I've ever met in all the years I've been a therapist. If half of my therapy clients were as resilient as you are, I'd be out of business because they wouldn't need therapy." And so
wait, that's a great descriptor of anybody. I mean, having resiliency is probably in the top 10 words of really personal development that you know, keep getting up and keep going. So good for
Yeah.
you. Say the name again, because I'm just
Well, so
thrilled.
God gave, so that word came to me, and when he gave the word for, which is brave heart workshops, at first I thought, God keeps telling me to write my own book. And I kept thinking I was going to call it resilience or resilient. And someone said, no, you need to keep the word brave heart. So I came up with resilient, brave heart, or brave hearts, even resilient, brave hearts. And then he gave me the tagline, inspiring hope, health, and healing. And so, and I may throw in too, because now Esther, the play Esther is playing in Branson, and Esther is and was a courageous and fearless queen who saved the Jewish people from being killed by King Xerxes. And so, yes, so let's put it on. And so the tagline in Queen Esther is she was chosen by God for such a time as this. So God told me now to help women and do an event in Branson called Resilient Brave Hearts for such a time as this, inspiring hope, health, and healing. So with that, Charla, I will share a little bit about my past so people understand why God's giving me this mission to be resilient, brave hearts for such a time as this.
And did you hear? I got this word right before the show to call you were living a life near death in your late 20s. That came to me when I was like that's.
Well, I should have died many times in my life, so I'll start us on a quicker journey, and then bring us to those instances. So, my mother was raised by a Greek father who was 30 years old, and a mother who got pregnant at 15 with my sibling, Gwen. So my sister was born when my grandma was only like 16, 17. And then my mother was born after that. And so her parents divorced, and she was put in a boarding home. And my mother was on her way to go visit her mother because they got divorced on Halloween, and she was going in an elevator, those old elevator doors, Charla, if you remember, that had the gates on it. And as a little girl that's excited to show her Halloween costume, she was kicking her feet at the gate, and her toes got caught and cut off in the elevator. So she was put in a wheelchair at 7 years old, and the man in the boarding home picked her up out of the wheelchair, and he raped her and said, "Don't ever tell anyone else, I'll kill your brother." So at that point, I really believe my mother started to be into a disassociated state. And as a result, I think she really was a borderline personality disordered person. At 17 years old, my mother's brother got sent off to war, and my grandfather went to Greece on holiday and left her alone at home. While he was on holiday, so my grandfather had to be in his 50s by now. He met a woman who was only about 23 years old and impregnated her and married her and brought her back to the United States. So he only knew her for 2 weeks. And she walked in the door, barely speaking Greek. And every time my mother would clean house, she'd say, "No good, no good, no good, Paniata." So as a result of this, I really do believe she wanted to get away. So she met my father, who was smitten to her, who proposed. And so at around 20, she married my father. And just to get out of the house, I believe, really. I think she loved him, but she got away. So she had my sister. And within a few months after my sister was born, found out she was pregnant with me. And I think she was so distraught having a first child who was a bubbly, energetic, like energizing bubble, bunny rabbit running around the house. She gets pregnant again, and she did not want a second child, and it was me. So from the moment of conception, I was not wanted. And her words for me until the day she passed away, she died in 2007, I believe, 2007, she passed away of pancreatic cancer. So all of my life, the words that proceeded out of her mouth were, "Jill, you're double ugly. There is nothing good about you, and who would ever want you? So my burden in life was that I was unwanted and unloved. And she even, Charla, would hold a bottle out like this instead of holding me in her arms to feed me. And she'd leave me in the crib for hours crying. So the only nurturing I got would be when my father would come home from work and he'd pick me up out of the crib and he'd hold me. Other than that, I had no attachment whatsoever. So as a little girl, I was nonverbal. I didn't speak at all. I mean, very few words would proceed out of my mouth, except when my dad would come home and I'd purge words with my dad. Well, my mother would hoover over me and rage at me, "Would you talk?" And I would just be petrified and not say a word. So fast forward at around 5 years old, I started having horrific stomach aches. And I would eat my meals at the dinner table and kept telling my parents my tummy hurt. But of course, being raised in the 50s on bread and white flour and pasta and cereals, no one would do anything. And so no one would acknowledge my stomach aches. So I started to chew my food and spit it out in a napkin to throw it away. Well, I wasn't thriving. I was like a little tiny, I mean, so tiny, so tiny. And my mother ended up then getting pregnant the third time with my brother, who was 3 years younger than me. And at the time she got pregnant, she had started having affairs. So she lived until her 40s, not knowing if my brother was my father's son or one of the men she had an affair with. That was like the family secret. It was revealed later that my brother is my father's biological, but they did a DNA test to prove it. So my mother was having multiple affairs. And one day when my dad was at work, she packed us all up and moved us from our home to an apartment complex right by a train track so she could be close to the man who was married she was having an affair with. My dad came home and distraught, found out we were all gone, and he was hysterical. He found out from the neighbors with the moving company where we lived, and we were court ordered back. But by the time we were court ordered back to the house, the man she was having the affair with died suddenly of a heart attack, and that spiraled my mother's borderline even more. So now the man she was in love with died. She was now divorcing my father. She had to get a job as a cocktail waitress working nights. They did divorce, but we'd see my dad just on Sundays. And my mother then would leave us. We were now in grammar. I mean, we were only kindergarten, first grade. She would leave us as lock key children. So we'd get out of school at 3 o'clock, walk home to an empty house. We'd call my grandma, who was a waitress, and say, "Grandma, how do you make a meatloaf?" Or "How do you do this?" And so we learned at a very early age not to have any parenting. We parented ourselves. So at the age of 7, my brother, 6, was only 4 years old, and my sister was only 8.5. And so it was a very lonely childhood, a very scary childhood. We would anesthetize our loneliness by watching TV. So at a young age, I learned how to numb out with food by just eating in front of the TV. But again, I was malnourished because remember, my tummy hurt. So in the summer months, when we didn't have school, my mother would get home. Sometimes she wouldn't get home till 4 or 5 in the morning because she'd get off work and go out with men. So in the summertime, she wanted to sleep in, or she'd have men over in the house. So she would throw us out of the house at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'd wander around the neighborhood with no boundaries all day and no bathroom and no food. So the neighbors saw this and they would invite us to their homes to use their bathroom. But I had so much shame, Charla, around being hungry that when my neighbor would ask if I wanted a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I would say, "No, I'm not hungry." So I'd go all day with no food. So I wasn't thriving. I was really malnourished and starving to death. So that's kind of the beginning of me trying to figure out how to overcome, childhood and figure out how to get through life. So that was kind of the beginning of my story.
That's a horrific beginning of life. And, so many people have horrific beginnings, and it's really sad. I've got a 17-month-old that lives with me that I can't even imagine. She's the delight of our lives. So I can't even imagine how horrific that was for you. And
lonely.
you
That
know,
was so lonely.
lonely. Yeah.
And yeah, so we were each other's caretakers. So then my mother one day went to a shoe store. She met a man at a shoe store, didn't know for and he immediately wanted to marry her. And my mom said yes. So here she is, only, maybe within a year, divorced to my dad, meeting a guy she didn't know. He moves in with us. And so one night, my sister spent the night at my grandma's, and it was just me and my brother. And he and I shared a bedroom together. We had twin beds. My sister had her own bedroom. I can't know why we didn't share, but we did. So one night, and we only had one bathroom downstairs, and our bedrooms were upstairs. So one night, I had to go to the bathroom, walk downstairs, and saw a silhouette of Marty in the dining room with a knife in his hand. When I got upstairs, I started hearing screams outside, and he was chasing my mother in the front yard to stab her. I watched her fall to the ground thinking he had killed her, and then saw him running towards the house. So I grabbed my brother, who was sound asleep. Somehow I picked him up at 7, pushed him under the bed, and he was sleeping. And under the bed, I put my hands over my ears and quit breathing so he couldn't find us. And I almost died because I held my breath so long and was petrified. And then the next thing I knew, my dad was called. And so I was under the bed for quite some time, at least a half an hour longer. And I just kept holding my breath, and I was blacking out. And he got us out of there. My mom was taken to the hospital. He had only injured her in her leg, and he was taken to jail. Well, when he was in jail and my mother was released from the hospital, she went to visit him at jail to walk in to find he had 2 other wives. He was a alcoholic. He was a bisexual who molested my brother and me. And he was a bigamist, married to 3 women. So that was my first stepfather. They divorced. So that was trauma in itself. And again, we continued to be Lock Hill child. And then in junior high, my mother met her third husband, my second stepfather. Well, he turned out to be an alcoholic, passive aggressive, who would dress up in women's clothes to have sex with my mom. So there were no sexual boundaries in our house. Doors were left open, Playboy Hustler magazines everywhere. He walked past me and grabbed my breasts or my buttocks and tell me how beautiful I was. And again, remember, my mother hated me. So when my mother saw this, she would rage at me and pound my head into the wall and tell me she hated me even more because she thought Tom loved me more than her. So the abuse perpetuated. So about this time in my life, my sister, again, remember, she was the bubbly girl. She was an orchestra. She got chosen as the homecoming queen and went to dances. And I was that little lost little girl, lost child who was really
ugly duckling kind of thing, right?
Well, I was actually gorgeous, to be honest with you. I was thin, but really beautiful, but I was so lost and quiet. And so one day I met a boy at a dance, and he asked me over to his house, and he was 17 and I was 14. So I went, and I remember distinctly what the house looked like. The color of the couch was flower, where the big glass window, in his living room. As I sat down on the couch, and we started to talk, and he leaned in to kiss me, and then he pushed me down on the bed, on the couch, and pulled my pants down, and he raped me. And after he raped me, he says, "You can get up now. I've broken your cherry and made you a woman." And I remember getting up and walking 5 miles home, bleeding and crying, thinking I deserved it. And I got home, and I never told a soul till I was in my 40s. And so as a result of that date rape, I ended up then feeling like I discovered, I was a freshman in high school, I discovered rage and anger. So I started raging now instead of keeping everything quiet. And I discovered White Cross amphetamines. So I started taking handfuls of amphetamines so I wouldn't eat, because I thought if I didn't eat, my body wouldn't form anymore, because I was starting to develop and I was looking quite beautiful. So the more White Crosses I took, the more I didn't eat and got thinner and thinner and thinner, and was very small framed. And I just wanted to disappear. I didn't want anyone to look at me. I started to dress in blue jeans and flannel shirts and chick kicker boots so I wouldn't look feminine. So that was kind of high school. And I ended up cutting every class freshman year and partying. And then somehow or another, graduating a half a year early. And on my 18th birthday, because we graduated in January, my birthday is February 12th, I left home with $25 in my purse, never to return again. That my stepfather and my mother ended up divorcing. He became a rape and went fight all night. My mother would come into my sister's in my bedroom now and sleep with us. Well, my bed was closest to the door. So she would jump in bed with me, and I had a twin bed, and she never slept with pajamas. So she would jump in bed with me nude. And later in life, my therapist said that that was considered covert sexual abuse. So now my mother, not only physically and emotionally abused me, but now it was sexual abuse with this sleeping together with, it just was disgusting.
This story is amazing. And because the time goes so fast, I had not heard all these details of this, and it's really, it's heartbreaking. It gives me, just sadness for you and for all children that have to deal with this, because I know there's a lot. So you have, you went through your 20s and went through all so we'll kind of run through the 20s.
Yeah, so the ending, and then we can maybe talk later more. So the ending is, this all led me to lots of drugs. I started to go down that slippery path and ended up becoming a crack cocaine addict in San Diego. And towards the end of my addiction, and I ended up, acting out. And so people that don't know this, I acted out by being even a naked dancer, because on stage, men couldn't touch me, but I could have power over them. And so I was still reliving that abuse by trying to empower. So how did I overcome everything is, if any of you have gone to see the movie that's been at the movie theater the last few months called Jesus Revolution, which was the Jesus Revolution of the 70s and 80s, where people came to Jesus high on drugs. I was part of that revolution in San Diego. And I ended up going to a Calvary Chapel church in La Mesa, California, with Mike McIntosh, and giving my life to Jesus Christ. And so I overcame crack cocaine addiction and alcoholism, but I was almost dead. I was down to 97 pounds. I had been living on one bowl of cereal a day for about 4 years. I should not be here. My brain was completely gone. I couldn't even remember where I was driving. So God really saved my life and has gotten me into this courageous journey.
You had a God moment, if I remember hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how much time we have left, because I know we're almost done, aren't we?
It's almost 1:30. And so we've got a hard out at 1:45 for your sake. And so, yeah, let's hear about the God moment, and then, fast forward to where we're headed and what you've been doing now and what you're headed.
Even taking us back then a little bit. So again, I almost died the time that I was under the bed at 7 of holding my breath. And then before I got to San Diego, I was hitchhiking around the United States and was safe, believe it or not. But then one night when I was a naked dancer, I stopped off one night to pick up a gallon of milk on my way home from work at 2 a.m. at a local liquor store right down the street from where I worked. And because that's all I ate was cereal. So I needed my milk. And a black gentleman, a big husky black gentleman, walked towards my car out of the liquor store and said, "Hey, ma'am, I don't have any money for a cab. Could you give me a lift to the Navy base in San Diego down the street?" And my first instinct was, no, it's 2 a.m, Jill, no. But then something inside me says, oh, don't, you're just being prejudiced because he's a black guy, give him a ride. So I went with that, and I should have gone with my first. So he got in my car, and I started to drive, and all of a sudden he leaned over to grab my breast, and I took my hand and just said, hey, come on, please leave me alone. And I had just gotten done dancing. And believe it or not, when you're a dancer, you don't want to be touched. You've been putting out all of this emotional, physical, sexual, and spiritual energy for 8 hours, and you don't want anyone to bother you. And so I said, please don't. So the next thing I know, boom, he comes across and slugs me into my eye. And I saw stars and my head went back and I started to black out and he started to strangle me. And I thought, this is it, I'm dying. And he was across like this and I only had one hand free. And somehow God told me, lean on your horn. So the one hand, I started beeping my horn and he must have seen the car's headlights and got scared and ran. Otherwise I would have died because I was moments away of, he was choking me to death. So that was one time that I almost died, another time. So, it was horrible. So then again, when I was blacking out from the drugs, I almost died. So God has had his hand on me for quite some time. So when I got saved in San Diego, I felt like God was telling me, leave San Diego and move back to Chicago. Well, my mother had been in a major car accident. Let me see, like 3 years before. And I had gone back to Chicago for a year to take care of my dysfunctional mother because she had brain damage. She was dead on arrival from a car accident. They said she'd never walk or talk again. She had gotten hit at 100 miles an hour and ejected from the car. So she had gotten a settlement and bought 2 condos in November. So when God told me to go back to Chicago, she said I could have one of the condos rent-free for a month till I got on my feet. So I ended up moving into one of hers. I put an ad in the paper looking for a straight Christian female roommate, and straight in those days meant no drugs, not gay, but it meant no drugs. So she moved in with me, which was a miracle. And then I started bartending at a bar. And one night, a guy at this bar was talking about this new church down the street that just opened, Willow Creek Community Church in Schaumburg, Illinois, Barrington. And the Holy Spirit said, go to church tomorrow. So I got off work at 2 a.m. Church was at 10, got home at 3, set my alarm and went to church at 10 a.m. And while I was working at that bar, one night before all this, I had met a guy, his name was Joe, and went out with him, did some coke with him, and then slept with him and never saw him again. It was like a one-night stand. So now I'm going to church and God's really working in my life. And I joined the singles ministry and was in Bible studies, and the desire to use drugs was just leaving me. And my life was changing. I wasn't sleeping around because when I was using Charla, I was a cocaine whore. I slept with a guy every night just to get free drugs. So, I can't even tell you how many people I slept with just for free drugs. So for me to stop sleeping around doing drugs was a big spiritual awakening for me. So one night I get a phone call and my roommate, Mary Jane, had decided to spend the night at her sister's. So Satan knew how to set this up. So Mary Jane's not there. I get a phone call from that guy, Joe, who says, hey, Jill, I'm down the street and I got some good blow. Can I come over? I says, well, Joey, I don't do drugs anymore and I'm not sleeping around. He goes, well, why? And I said, because I found God. And he says, well, could I come over so you can tell me about God? Well, I was only a 7-month-old Christian and I fell for that lie. So he came over and within 5 minutes, he poured out a vial of cocaine on my glass coffee table. I ended up getting high and he wanted sex. And I said, well, Joe, I'm not on any birth control. And before I had become a Christian, Charla, and was using drugs all the time, I had gotten pregnant twice and thought that my answer was abortion, which it wasn't, because I ended up on my second abortion, almost jumping out of a car at 65 miles an hour to commit suicide. I was so distraught. And so I'd already had 2 abortions. So when he had told me he wanted sex, I said, I can't, I'm not on birth control. I know I'll get pregnant. He said, oh, don't worry, I've had a vasectomy. So I slept with them and 4 weeks later was pregnant. So to me, Satan had shown up at my house that day. And so I had backslidden on the drugs, backslidden on sex, and now I was at that dilemma of having another pregnancy. And so I wanted to reason with God and just say, hey, God, please give me permission to have one more abortion. Like God's really going to give me permission to murder a baby. And I said, because I said, I'm too embarrassed and humiliated and ashamed to let my friends at church know that I had sex outside of marriage, because there's only one sin we can't hide behind. And guess what it is? sex that leads to pregnancy. You can't, the whole world knows what you did. So I wanted to end that pregnancy so no one would know. Well, one night, 3 days before my abortion, God led me into taking a hot bath. And in the bathtub, as I was crying out to God, I literally could see Jesus walking down the path on his way to be crucified, carrying the cross, being beaten, mocked, spat on, and ridiculed. And he looked up at me from the ground bleeding. He says, Jill, why do you care what man thinks of you when I've suffered more embarrassment, humiliation, and shame than anyone in the world would ever face? And I've done it all for you. So I canceled my abortion, and that was 41 years ago. And I had my son, and he's 40 years old. And I now have 3 amazing grandchildren, all for the result of God showing me that he is the essence of humility. And I wrote that chapter in a collaborative book called Fiercely Faithful that I'm authored in.
And the title of your
chapter
in there is humble.
Is the essence of humility.
The essence of humility. Very nice. So very cool. So that is like an eggshell or a snapshot of a horrible life that has now led to redemption and resilience and restoration, because now you're offering, after 30, many years, you've overcome drug addiction, sex addiction, alcohol addiction, the codependency addiction,
eating disorders, all of them.
Let's check them all off, right? And so you've really done an amazing overcoming, and you have a gift of connecting people. And so, as I do, collector and connector of fascinating people. And so right now, we've only got about 5 more minutes of this until you need to be out. So,
so what
you've gone through the rest of that time, your next 30 years of learning to listen and to bless others. And so right now, you've got a book out, you're going to have a TV show, you've got a podcast, you've got a I dropped out of my head what else I was going to say about that. So where else are you? There's so much going on. Events, I think.
So a couple of things are happening. So now I'm getting asked to speak on stages, and I've spoken twice at the Becoming the Best You Can Be conference. One was in Kansas City, one was St. Louis. We have a third one coming up the last week in August that I'll be speaking at. And I've been asked last year and now this year to speak at the Safe in His Arms conference. So I'm now speaking on stages, but God told me about 8 weeks ago to do another conference. And this one is going to be called, of course, Resilient Brave Hearts for Such a Time as This, Inspiring Hope, Health, and Healing. And he's asked me to align with 2 women. One woman, her name is Overseer Dee Forbes. She's a Black woman out of North Carolina who's a pastor, and she's a recovered addict, and she's got a ministry called No Longer Broken. And then my girlfriend, Brenda Ringwood, she's the one who's got the conferences called Becoming the Best You Can Be. So I'm aligning with 3 of them, the 2 of them, and it was so cool, Charla. So if you put it all together, my tagline is Resilient Brave Hearts. Dee's is No Longer Broken, and Brenda's is Becoming the Best You. So you put it all together and you have resilient brave hearts that are no longer broken and are becoming the best you can be. So we're going to put this amazing event together in Branson, Missouri on August 19th and 20th. The tickets are only $22 for those in need and $48 for those who could afford a ticket. And I encourage everyone to come to this event because you will be completely inspired and transformed by the topics we're going to do. And what's cool is the play Esther is playing in Branson. So I encourage everyone to fly in or drive in on the 17th, go see Esther at the Sight and Sound Theater on Friday, the 18th, and then come to the Resilient Braveheart Conference on the 19th and 20th. Branson is fabulous. We're in the Ozark Mountains, surrounded by mountains and lakes. And in August, it's spectacular and beautiful. So I'm praying that every woman from 12 years old up will come, because we have so much in store for you.
Well, I know it sounds awesome. So last moment here, what is your strongest message? What do you want to leave people with that that want to be overcomers as strongly as you are?
Well, I can tell you, everybody's on their own journey. I can tell you none of this in my life would have ever happened if I hadn't surrendered. You can choose ways you care, but through me really surrendering, the word is surrendering my will over to God and having him direct my life is what really changed my life. Everybody can do it on their own path, but that's what worked for me. And so I'd leave you with, if you haven't yet come into a personal relationship with God and Jesus Christ, to look into it and ask yourself, why are you resisting that? And that would be my first question, is to go down that journey. And if you do have a relationship with him and you're stuck, reach out to me. I do transformational coaching as well, and see where you're stuck, because I really do believe God wants you to be set free, and he wants to inspire hope in him. He wants you to have the health of your body, because when you accept him into your life, the Holy Spirit lives within you, and he wants you to be healed from anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, eating disorders, addictions, codependency. He desires that. And so I believe every woman out there that we are all courageous and fearless Esthers for such a time as this.
For such a time as this is, and interestingly, I had that as my tagline on my first radio show many years ago now. Charla awakened for such a time as this, Esther 4:14. I want to just say this too. There are people that are resistant to religion, and this isn't about religion. This is about relationship and faith. So I just, when we can stop being offended by things and learn to just hear in our spirit that there might be something more to learn, because if you stop hearing, then you don't learn. And so anyway, I'll usually try to say that if we're in a conversation about God, that, it's about relationship, and religion is kind of keeps God in a box. So it's not about that. So Jill is a master at helping through that. And you can be found at
braveheartworkshops.com, and make sure you put an S at the end, workshops.com. And you can reach out to me by email as well by going to braveheartworkshops@gmail.com. And I'd love for you to connect with me. On my website, there's a page that says Connect Now. And at the bottom of it, it has a drop down of what arenas you'd like to connect. And also it's got all my social media sites on my website as well.
Very, very cool. So we're, and you're also on Facebook, of course. Braveheart Workshops is on, and Jill Jacob Reynolds is on Facebook. We're everywhere and of course I've got links and
I always I just go by Jill Reynolds, but on Facebook I go by Jill Jacobs Reynolds.
Because there's
so
a lot.
My high school friends could find me, but I'm not into the hyphenated names, but that's the reason.
Well, most of us, want to at least have that in there for that. So we've only got 1 minute till you're out of here. So your next is, I was going to say what's next, but we already know you've got this next August workshop, and
actually 2 other things are coming up. I forgot to tell you, I will be authored in another collaborative book called Becoming the Best You Can Be. So I'll be in a collaborative book, and my chapter in that book will be called Wanted, because I have a wanted story. And then I'm going to be in another collaborative book called Hope. And that story, I'll have a chapter called Train Whistle, which is a whole nother story. So, keep those books in mind, Hope, and then Becoming the Best You Can Be. But I have to run. I love you so much, and I'm so grateful you gave me a platform. And really, ladies out there, I'm not begging you, but I'm really
Begging.
encouraging you. I'm encouraging you to drop everything and come to Branson. Charla, I want you here just to participate and hug you and love on you. And I just think we'd have a blast together, all of us ladies together in Branson, Missouri in August. And I also am a fabulous water aerobics teacher. So if you come and we hang out at the pool, we can do water aerobics.
Sounds like fun. Well, thank you for being here with me today. I know you need to run, and I will just close out the show as you're gone.
Well,
She's
if you need
gone.
to stay
Oh,
on,
I thought you were.
I'll hit leave and you can,
Yeah.
whatever you need to do, I'll hit leave. Thanks, everyone. I love you, Charla. We'll talk later.
Take care. Blessings.
Bye.
So maybe you have a miracle story to tell. Maybe you want to have an overcomer. Maybe you want to share your story. Every one of us has them. And I would love, love, love for you to reach out to me if you'd like to be on my show. Charla at charlaanderson.com, Charla at charlaanderson.com, not very hard. And so typically I close with thank you very much for taking the time to pay attention here. I never know where it's going to go. We are all overcomers. So some stories are stronger than others, but we all have them. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for just being in my life. Every single person that I run across, my dream, my goal is to let my life, my light permeate into you so that you kind of feel touched by God with skin on or something, because that's what we are created. Anyway, thank you for joining us. We don't have any advertising on Win Win Women. I love that. I don't wouldn't advertise something that I don't believe in. But you can check out my website. In fact, if you go to charlaanderson.com/links, there's a whole bunch of different ways to connect with me. I'm looking forward to having you next week. We're, continuing weekly on the Charla Anderson Show, collector and connector of fascinating people. Everyone is fascinating. So I just want to end with this. Always, 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 always choose joy. I'm going to end it now. Blessings to you.